and welcome to another episode of Not a Lady, a Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman podcast. This is Kelly.
And I'm Sarah.
And this is episode 7 of season 1, titled Bad Water.
And we're so excited to talk about this episode. Long awaited and highly anticipated episode.
Yes, this is a well-loved episode by a lot of fans, so we're excited to give you our take on all the things that happen.
However, before we can jump into the episode, we need to make a correction from our last episode. We were sent an email by our friend Julie, who very wisely pointed out a very big mistake that happened within the first 3 minutes of the episode, in which all I really wanted to do was talk about Tom Selleck and our dad's mustache, but in turn, I messed up. The confusion was I started talking about Hawaii Five-0, thinking that was the Hawaiian detective classic that Tom Selleck had starred in, when in fact he had starred in Magnum P.I., and I think it's totally fair that I got them confused because they're both detective shows that take place in Hawaii, and they've both been rebooted in the last 10 years.
Well, that's what's so funny about it is you were like, oh, it's not the Hawaii Five-0 you like, it's the old one. And I'm like, I know there's an old one. And then I let you proceed to not talk about the right one. So
not talk about the right
faults.
Actor anyway. Yeah.
So
for those of you longtime fans of Tom Selleck or Hawaii Five-0, we're sorry. We were corrected.
Nobody's mad that we talked about Tom Selleck's mustache, though.
Okay, good. Thank you for making me feel better about that. Our first order of business is
lessons. I've got one here from our friend Petulis, who says, the lesson of this episode is in part to not let fear get in your way. Sully could have lost his chances with Dr. Mike to Mr. Cooper. He got lucky. Mike could have lost her chances to bond with the ladies if she wasn't honest. Also, Sully was letting fear stop him from riding, something I think he loves in later seasons and actually comes in handy.
Excellent. And we'll talk about Sully's riding in this episode.
Yeah, we will.
Lisa Farber King 6 on Instagram actually commented twice, so I'm gonna kind of try and summarize and pick out her lessons. One of her lessons was the audience learned that Sully was not fooled by Ethan's charm. He had his number from the beginning, which is true. And Michaela didn't realize what kind of man Ethan was until she caught him with the money. And Lisa also wrote that lies can be used to hide the truth, and deceit keeps people from knowing who you really are, for better or for worse.
Nice.
Which I think is very true. You know, how you can't ever really get to know someone if they're living a lie.
Right. Here's another one from Gilmore Forever. It says, I feel there was a lesson within a lesson with the arrival of Mr. Cooper. Appearances and manners can really influence people's opinions. I myself fell for his charm before realizing who he really was, and I am not one to succumb to the power of the mustache. And in that, we also learned that appearances can be deceitful, and all that glitters is not gold.
We also got an email from someone who signs their emails Grateful Fan, so we're just going to call them Grateful Fan. Grateful Fan's lesson was, I think the lesson Dr. Mike learned was who to trust and whose advice to listen to. She was very upset about the death, taking the responsibility on herself, and Mr. Cooper, or as Kelly famously called in the last episode, Pooper Cooper, is basically like, keep that to yourself and don't tell anyone. They even used your vernacular. Sully, on the other hand, whose heart is more in line with hers, tells her the complete opposite and tells her to tell the truth. She ended up following that advice in the end, which wasn't a surprise to me. She didn't tell the truth to the kids because she realized that Sully has or had no other intentions other than wanting to help the family. And then Grateful Fan put ... Well, maybe he does have some other intentions, winky face, but definitely none to harm. And why did she even question Sully when he said this guy you just met stole the money? I mean, come on, Michaela. You just met this guy. How are you believing him over Sully? Sully brings you turkeys.
I thought there was a very valid point. I'm like, how did we not discuss this last episode about the fact that she immediately is like, he would never do that. What are you talking about to Sully? When I'm like, literally? How are you doubting Sully of all people? Like, that's straight and narrow and you're going to doubt him, but...
Maybe she thought he was jealous. Or, to be honest, I think we talked about it in the last episode. Like, I think Dr. Mike really wanted to believe the best about Ethan Cooper, which is admirable, but unfortunately was wrong.
Wrong. Yeah, exactly. Well, should we jump in?
Absolutely.
Do your thing, girl.
Season 1, Episode 7, titled Bad Water, aired on the 6th of February, 1993. We now have officially watched a whole month, more or less, of Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, so that's pretty exciting. The director was Chuck Bowman, which this is his second episode to direct. The first one he directed that we've watched would have been Epidemic. And the writers, obviously Bess Sullivan, creator, and Sarah Davidson. This is her third credit as writer on the show.
All right, so we start off. We see some men riding into town on their horses. Men that we have not seen before, I will say that. And they end up at the post office with Horace, where basically we find out that this gentleman, Mr. Harding, is filing a new claim for gold. And it's quite funny because they really want to ensure that Horace does not let anybody know about this. Want him to keep it very quiet. And Horace, being the truthful and honest guy he is, ensures them that he took an oath and all claims are confidential.
So what was really funny about this is when Horace says, I took an oath, I was like, well, you're a post office worker. Like, what kind of oath are you taking? So I did some research. I found an entire 149-page book titled The United States Postal Service, An American History. I have linked it in our resources on our website. I skimmed through it. It's actually super fascinating because did you know that the U.S. Postal Service was actually established by the Founding Fathers during the Continental Congress when they made the Declaration of Independence, because the Founding Fathers believed that colonists, Americans, had a right to free exchange of news and ideas, because one of the ways that, England was keeping the colonists in the dark was preventing them from getting news and, all their letters and things were being gone through or thrown away, whatever. And so the Postal Service was 1775. The postal system was established in America, which is so cool to think that that was like a part of the initiative to become a country.
Right.
But then what was more interesting is as I skimmed through pieces of this book, I found lots of examples of postmaster generals and mail carriers being sworn in before they took their office. So here we were thinking, that Horace was maybe the post office was the only place he really could do any work, but actually that is a pretty important job, and the fact that he had to take an oath about...
He treats it that way, too. He treats it like it's a very important job.
For sure. I think maybe I didn't treat it like...
Right. No, yeah, I know. Me too.
So I thought that was fun. And if anyone is interested in learning more about the American history of the U.S. postal system, there's a whole book linked on our website. I attached it there. Lots of resources for this episode. So super cool. And the man staking the claim, as you mentioned, we haven't learned his name yet, but Mr. Harding is played by Michael Cavanaugh. And when I went on his IMDb page to see what other things he had been in, he has over 158 acting credits in his resume, which is crazy.
Yeah, he looked familiar to me, but I wasn't sure why.
There were so many things that I was like, oh, I've seen that, or he guest starred in so many shows, but the one thing that just made me laugh to see is he was the judge in the Shia LaBeouf movie Holes, who sentenced Stanley Yelnats to his time at Camp Green Lake.
I love that movie. I haven't seen that movie in like 100 years.
I watched it like a couple weeks ago because I love that movie so much.
That's funny.
But anyway, before they leave the post office, one of
his men,
I was going to say his cronies, like,
what?
Horace says, like, I'm not going to tell anyone I took an oath. And then he's like, you better not, like, threatens him.
He's like, keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, but also, I just want to say so that you, Kelly, and listeners can realize how serious and how much work and dedication we put into this podcast.
You.
Behind the guys in the post office, there's about 7 wanted posters. And it's like, wanted for murder, wanted for highway robbery, like all this stuff. And I literally paused and rewound and Googled every name on every wanted poster in the background, only to find out that none of them are real people.
I'm pretty sure the only person that has ever done that.
I rewound so many times, I heard Horace say, like, I took an oath like 18 times.
That's really wild. Also, if they were real people, I would have been like, wow, they really went above and beyond to make this real.
You know what, though? I would have been, like, so excited if it had been, like, real outlaws. But I was like, okay, I guess we can't all win. But sometimes in things like that, it's always kind of interesting because though they weren't, like, real historical people, I'm like, did someone make these names up? Or sometimes, like, productions, they do fun things, like, those are names of, like, crew members or like family members, and so it's kind of funny they get to like see themselves in like the background of an episode. But I didn't find any information on that, but there were some interesting names to say the least.
Over at the saloon, we see Hank having a good time while working. And we also see a young, he's not a boy, he's kind of a kid. A young man.
Youths. A youth played by Jared Rushton, who was in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. That's what I recognized him from.
Well, he basically is demanding whiskey from Hank, in which, you know, Hank makes a funny comment about, like, if you don't have facial hair, I can't serve you. But he coughs up quite a bit of money, and it convinces Hank pretty quick.
I'm just going to say it now because I'm going to say it more later in the episode, but I really enjoyed Hank in this episode. Like, his quips and his little one-liners, and he had me roaring most of this episode. And so, yeah, he, like, pulls out the money, and he's like, I can see you getting older by the minute.
Right. Well, this kid, he gets a little tipsy, I guess, because he kind of stumbles out of the saloon right into poor little Brian and his big basket of eggs.
A lot of eggs. Let's be honest, I really feel like this situation escalates very quickly. Like,
oh, for sure.
Matthew yells at him. He goes to walk away, and then Matthew just, like, tackles him, and then they're having a full-out brawl outside the saloon.
Yeah. In which, of course, Dr. Mike gets involved. Dr. Mike's trying to split them up. Well, then, instead of Dr. Mike, we have someone better for the job, which would be Sully. And I will say,
I'm not going to say what I thought when it happened.
This was the first time I thought, okay, maybe Sarah has a point. Like, he actually did come out of nowhere. Like, he literally just appeared. It was like Houdini magic. I was like, okay.
I'm really glad you said it, because I was, like, thinking it, like, where'd he come from?
But there's some other people involved. Sully tries to get in there. Then Mr. Harding's in there trying to split it up. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting because when it comes to, like, oh, well, who started it? Whose fault is it? All the townspeople really, you know, chime in and say, like, yeah, it was your son's fault, Mr. Harding. Like,
yeah.
It was not Matthew.
Yeah.
Which is pretty interesting, especially since you kind of said he instigated it, but Matthew kind of started it, I guess.
You know what it probably is? Brian got knocked over. Nobody knocks Brian over in this town.
Yeah, seriously. But, of course, Mr. Harding has a little bit of a rude response where he tosses I don't know how much
it's like a gold coin.
That coin was. Yeah, he just kind of throws it in front of Dr. Mike and Brian, in which Dr. Mike's like, I'm pretty sure an apology is more in order, but it doesn't happen because they walk off. And then we have our title sequence with narration. I did notice this time.
You're going to notice every time now because I said something about the one episode.
Yes, exactly.
After the title sequence, we're in the clinic where over the course of a little bit of time, we see Mr. Stone, who we've never met before, Olive, and Reverend Johnson all come in saying they are having all sorts of symptoms from, throwing up to sore gums to hair loss to just feeling really tired and worn out. And I think Dr. Mike's pretty awesome here in the way that she looks for the common, what's the common denominator for all these people, which I also, like, if you think about it, I mean, we don't really know much about Mr. Stone, but from his dress, and we assume that he probably doesn't live in the town, whereas we know Olive, lives in the town, works in the mercantile, and then we have Reverend Johnson, who, maybe has, like, a parish, or, I don't know, maybe he lives in the back room of the church or something. But these are three people who, on a daily basis, might not have a huge reason to be interacting. And so the fact that they all have the same symptoms, it really points to there must be something.
Doctors should do that. I think it's great. That's one of the things I've been learning a lot is you have to take a good history. You have to ask a lot of really intentional questions because patients aren't going to come up with that stuff on their own for the most part. It is important to say that she gives Mr. Stone something called paregoric, which was pretty common in the 18th and 19th century. Today it would be called more opium tincture.
Opium? She gonna get them addicted.
No, although it's similar, but it's a lesser dosage, a lesser titration, but still dangerous to say the least. But mostly back then they were using it to control diarrhea, clear mucus from the lungs, and often they would give it to babies to rub on their gums to help with teething. Yeah, in this case, it's being used to help his stomach symptoms, obviously. But yeah, you have to be really careful with it because if you kind of overdose on that, how it's going to act on your body, its mode of action is it's going to slow your heart rate, slow your breathing, cause your muscles to be weak, cause drowsiness. Like, it's very potent if you use it that way. So we also see that she gives Olive something called alum, which is just a chemical salt. I mean, like, you could Google it today, and which is what I did, and it's like a very, like, natural sort of treatment that you can use to tighten the gums and kind of reduce the gaps between your teeth so that they're not as irritated. So in this case, because she's having gum bleeding and such. But it is kind of funny, like you said, they're all there having this conversation. And in my mind, maybe it's just because I'm a medical person, I'm like, I guess there's no, like, patient confidentiality, huh? Like, it's just like, let's spread all of our news. And I think they honestly don't care. But I thought about it first because the Reverend kind of walks in when Olive is, like, finishing buttoning up her shirt, and it's like, yeah, that's crazy. He just, like, walks in the middle of, like, a patient-provider scenario. I don't know. I know it really doesn't matter at this time, but it made me laugh because I was like, I guess HIPAA's not around? I'm not really sure.
I didn't even think of that because, yeah, like you said, like, I'm not a medical person, so my thought was I would be so relieved to know, like, it's not just something going on with me, to be like, oh, you're having hair loss too and feeling tired too, like, because even, like, Olive almost has, like, a little bit of a meltdown because she's worried that she might be going through menopause or something.
Good job for knowing that's what she meant by saying that, by the way.
The change. I guess I've watched enough period dramas.
Period dramas?
But
Did you say that yesterday and I just did not think that was funny or what? Oh my gosh, that is that is literally the funniest thing that's ever happened. Oh my gosh.
Historical traumas is what I was insinuating. But I can't even think. I was just gonna say I think I would be relieved too to know that I'm not the only one experiencing whatever, because these are all pretty serious symptoms, especially to have all together, right?
Yeah. And sure enough, Dr. Mike is insistent on figuring this out, and she gets the whole family involved. We see them next down by Willow Creek, looking.
Because they figure out that the common thing is.
Oh, maybe you should say that. I didn't realize you didn't say that.
No, sorry, I didn't. She figures out that they all, in some way or another, have been drinking from Willow Creek.
Whether that be water or moonshine or whatever. Yeah, she does a good job at figuring that out. And she's insistent on even going further into discovering what is really happening. She gets the whole family involved, and we see them next down by Willow Creek. They don't know exactly what they're looking for, but Sully, sure enough, finds some weird silver-looking stuff, and I really felt like I should have understood this part more because, like, I was a bio major. I took organic chemistry. I had plenty of labs where we had to do plenty of chemical reactions, but I'm not sure exactly what happens because it's like there's silver stuff, she's rubbing the copper cup, then she's rubbing nickel on the copper, and then suddenly she's like, oh, it is mercury. And I'm like, okay, not sure what happened, but you go, Dr. Mike.
I was hoping you would know because I definitely didn't know.
Yeah, like I said, some sort of chemical reaction, but I don't know the details.
They take a lot of initiative here, right? She finds out what the source is. They go to the creek. They find evidence of mercury in the water. And then the next thing is Horace putting up a sign outside the post office that says danger. And you know how we've been talking about titles a lot the past couple episodes? And so I liked where it was like, danger, bad water. And I was like, ta-da! There's the title.
Yep.
And then Dr. Mike starts asking Horace questions for details about Willow Creek, which I'm going to express an issue I had with what's about to happen, but then I'm also going to explain away my own issue. Because the first thing that I was like, why is she asking Horace? And we as the audience know, oh, she has to ask Horace because we've already established within this episode that Horace knows information. Because in the opening scene, Harding says, I'm staking a new claim above my mill in Willow Creek, right? Or whatever. So we as audience members already know she has to ask Horace because he's the one who has the information she needs. However, if I were Dr. Mike, I'd be going directly to Sully, right? Like, he lives in the woods and he probably knows the area and the landscape and where, so I'm kind of like, why does she ask Horace other than the fact that we know he has the answer? However, later in the episode, Horace is going to bring up when the search party is like lost for forever, but he's going to say something about like, I've seen it on a map, and someone else is going to be like, yeah, well, maps can be wrong. But especially considering, we talked about the oath and how like important it was, and the fact that people come to him to stake claims, it does actually make sense. Who is like the one person that maybe everyone in Colorado Springs and in the surrounding area will probably interact with? It's probably Horace, right? Because of the post office. Like, if anyone wants to send anything or receive anything, it's gonna go through Horace. So actually, he probably knows more people in the town than a lot of other people, as well as, yeah, because of, the mining and the staking claims, he probably sees and hears a lot about different areas surrounding. So, at first I was like, why is she asking Horace? But then, actually it makes sense because he interacts with a lot of people, yeah. and all those people's knowledge put together actually would make him a really good person to know. And obviously he probably does have the maps to the town. Right. So it was all very interesting. However, I also was like, other than like historical accuracy, why did we establish that Horace took an oath and won't say anything when 6 scenes later he breaks the oath and tells someone? Right. But I think I know why. It's because if we had just had Horace, go, oh, of course, I took an oath and I won't tell anyone. And, Harding and his guys had walked right back out of the post office, then we wouldn't have known they were the bad guys. But because Horace says, oh, I took an oath, I'm very confidential, and then you have one of the, the sidekicks lean over and be like, you better keep your mouth shut. We're like, oh, bad guy.
We don't like them anymore. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, and sure enough, he, like you said, he breaks the oath. He indicates that the creek runs by Harding's gold mill, and that is actually where Harding is trying to make a claim. And so Dr. Mike takes that knowledge very quickly and kind of runs with it, because she goes over to the saloon. She says to Harding, like, do you guys use mercury? And he's like, yeah, we use it to separate gold from ore. And she's like, you won't have a problem if I take a sample then. And they have this interaction of like, well, I'm going to go do that because I need to prove to Denver that you could be poisoning people and causing them all this multi-organ failure. And he's like, no, outsiders can't come. There are no jump claims, which I don't really understand exactly what that means. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, so I did a lot of reading on mining. Most people, as far as United States mining goes, most people know about the California gold rush of 1849, which would have been shortly before when Dr. Quinn is set. But what's really interesting is especially with mining, there were not many laws or things about mining, especially in the beginning. And so mining camps kind of made up their own rules. Harding actually has a pretty justified reason for not wanting Dr. Mike to come to his camp, other than the fact that she's right and he's causing a lot of problems for people. But the way that claims for miners worked was that claims were granted to the first person to put land to beneficial use. And this whole process of mining claims was legalized by Congress in 1866, which again would be kind of right around when we've established that Dr. Quinn is happening. And then later there was what's called the Mining Act of 1872. And there are 4 types of mining claims. And so based on what I read, the short version of the mining claims, the way that it worked is people would go out to some land, they would start mining, and that land would be what's called unpatented. And in order to get a patent, which is a deed for that land, you had to prove to the federal government that there was gold or whatever resource you're trying to get in order for them to grant you the deed. So where claim jumping comes into play is you go out, you start excavating or whatever, digging into the land. If you find something, then you have to take it and prove to the government, okay, I found something on this land, I want to buy it. And so the danger is, because you can't own the land for mining until you prove that there is stuff to mine on it, there's a danger of someone else knowing or finding out that there's gold there and turning in the claim first.
Right.
And there was this whole process of if you have unpatented land, you could pay fees to kind of not let anyone else lay claim to it. But who wants to pay a fee on land that you don't know if it's going to be, beneficial or have anything there to begin with?
Yeah.
And so this is where you kind of get that genuine concern that Harding, if that's all he was worried about is someone jumping, because we know based on scene 1, we know he has found gold. So yeah, I feel like he has a genuine reason to not want her there. Not that she would lay
that
claim,
was my
but
thought.
If someone found out, then yeah, it could be complicated.
Yeah.
But we actually get a brief look. I always forget Sully was a miner. We recognize he actually is familiar with Harding because he had some mining buddies who died in a cave-in in one of Harding's mines, which kind of hints that Dr. Michael say later Sully's kind of got a bias because it seems like he's out to shut Harding down altogether. She just wants to find out where
the source of Mercury
from.
Right.
What's kind of weird is when she asks Harding about, does your mill, does Willow Creek run by your mill or whatever, Harding actually says that the creek itself passes at least a dozen other mills too. So I kind of am why does she hone in on him?
I know, I guess my thought is either okay, that's the closest mill. There are a lot of different types of mill. Maybe they're not all the types that would have Mercury, something like that. Or yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe she's just targeting him and that's just what we need for the storyline.
A dog with a scent.
Yeah.
She's gonna chase it down.
Yeah. But I do think it's important to mention that she says to him, people that experience this prolonged mercury exposure, their lungs and kidneys give out and they die of convulsions, And just for those that don't know, I feel like mercury poisoning is not as common today, and that's because we have much safer ways of doing things, but it still does happen because anytime, let's say, fish are in those water, they get exposed to mercury and we eat those fish as humans, we can become sick from that. Also, there's still gold mills and gold mining that goes on in countries like Ghana or Indonesia, and a lot of the people that work at those mines often get mercury poisoning. And so we've kind of already seen some of the symptoms that happens from that. There's also a lot of neuro symptoms. I only am like really interested in this because we just finished the neurology module, so I feel like I know something. But, you know, if you have prolonged exposure, you're going to have a lot more neurological symptoms. It's really going to affect your cerebellum, which is very important for coordination and balance. So you kind of actually start losing those kind of motor abilities. You experience peripheral neuropathy, which is where you have numbness, tingling, burning sensations, usually in some of your extremities. So at this point, yeah, it really could lead to a lot of brain conditions, kidney damage, cancer. Today, normally how they treat it, and we'll see like a mini version of this later, but they do something called chelation therapy, where they give you this compound that binds to whatever heavy metal is in you, so in this case, mercury. And if it binds to it, then it causes the body not to have to bind to that mercury. And so then it can be excreted instead of harming the body in other ways. So it kind of made me laugh because when I was doing some extra research on this, there's actually like tons of stories of people dying from mercury poisoning, including the first unified emperor of China, who was told that if he took these mercury pills, he would have everlasting life. And then he very shortly after died, which I thought was kind of ironic.
I know about this because he's the emperor who, like, he built the terracotta warriors. He started the construction on the Great Wall. And he had this, like, horse island where, like, all his, like, military horses were, like, trained on this island, and we went on a school trip there. I led a school trip, and this was a big part of the discussion, is he spent most of his life searching for a remedy to help him live forever, and it was one of those remedies that ended up killing him.
I know, which is just very ironic to me. Also, did you know that mercury poisoning is also where we get the term Mad as a Hatter, or even just thinking of the character Mad Hatter, because in the 18th, 19th century, there were women who made hats. Well, not just women, but people that made these like felt hats. And one of the things that was very important in that process was mercury. And so that's why hatter, as in someone that makes a hat, because they had all these neurological symptoms, that's how we use the phrase Mad as a Hatter or Mad Hatter, which I thought was very interesting. I had no idea where that came from, but...
Wow, that explains a lot about that character, too.
Right, exactly, because he kind of goes crazy, so...
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And not awesome for the people who probably actually died from it, but...
Yes.
But, I mean, I think there's lots of examples in history of, like, historical beauty practices that killed people or did horrible things to their skin.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting how much this show is teaching me, and I hope it's teaching you guys some things too, but we have Harding leave the saloon after he said, "It's not my concern, and if you come to my mill, I will shoot you on sight."
Yeah.
So, of course, Dr. Mike has it in her head that she's going to go to the mill and she is going to get some water, in which Sully's like, they're walking in town and having this conversation, and Sully says that he'll do it. He has previous experience with assay work,
which I didn't know what that was, and so I Googled the definition. It is to analyze an ore or allay in order to determine quantity of gold, silver, or other materials.
So we're kind of given this other insight.
Which he probably would have done as a miner.
Yeah. He has some experience, so he...
But she says she couldn't trust the results, A, because he's not a scientific person, I guess, and because he has an obvious bias towards Harding, so a judge or whoever might say that
his results are invalid. Yeah.
Because he wanted Harding to get shut down, because he said so in front of a room full of people.
He's very adamant that he does not want Dr. Mike to come. She's going to slow him down. And if people get sick, she needs to be there, which is true. And of course, Dr. Mike, being the stubborn, independent woman that she is like, well, that's fine. I'll go by myself. And I really like it because Sully just like stands there and like looks at Wolf, and like you can see his internal like monologue of like, what am I going to do with you, woman? Like, what am I going to do with you?
This woman.
Exactly. And so there's also this kind of humorous interaction at Bray's store between Mike and Olive, which I know you really liked.
I loved everything about this scene because, first of all, Olive's like, you're not planning, Dr. Mike's like obviously buying a lot of supplies. And she's like, you're not planning on going up to get that water, are you? And Dr. Mike's like, what makes you think that? And she's like, getting to know ya. And which I just love. It's like, yeah, of course she is, right? You even said it, like, of course. He says, if you come, I'm going to shoot you. And she's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to come. And then it's like, they have this like girl moment, right? Where she's like, Sully doesn't want me to go. He says I'm going to slow him down. And then Olive's like, you ride as good as he does, which I thought was interesting because she's only really learned to ride like what episode are we on? 7. Like in the pilot, like 6 episodes ago, she learned to ride. Again, this show doesn't give us a very clear standing of like how much time has passed, but depending on, so in the order that the episodes are released, Sully only learned to ride last episode. I also looked it up on that logical viewing order. Technically, by that one, he learned to ride like 2 or 3 episodes ago, so that one gives him a little more time, I guess. But the fact is, the reason she says that, though, is just to be like, there must be another reason. He doesn't want to be alone with you. And Dr. Mike's like, why do you say that? And she's like, I can't imagine.
It's like I was like cringing too hard, but then I also was like, it's kind of funny because Dr. Mike's blushing, and it's definitely like this like girl talk moment where you're like, what? Yeah. I do like Olive in this.
She blushes so hard. Olive is great in this episode. I think this is where we should have been after the healing, like this makes sense, where they really seem much more close as friends. But yeah, I think it's like a super cute, like when she blushes and they're all like giggling and I'm like, ah.
Right, and it makes me laugh because then the very next scene is Dr. Mike and Sully riding on their horses.
I was so excited when I saw Sully was riding a paint that I literally stopped the episode, went back to Father's Day to look and see if it was, I would have loved it so much if it was the same horse that Cloud Dancing had ridden, because I just would have loved the like headcanon that Cloud Dancing lent Sully his horse to go on this quest. But unfortunately, it's not the same paint. Like their markings were not the same at all. Still a gorgeous paint, and I still can headcanon like, oh yeah, it was a horse that the Cheyenne lent to him.
And maybe that was the idea, right? Maybe the idea was for it to look like it was Cloud Dancing's horse, but you're just way too gosh darn observant that it's not helping.
But well, and then also what could be an argument for that as well, whether it's Cloud Dancing's or not, it's very likely be a Cheyenne horse because Sully is riding bareback again, which makes sense because that's how he learned how to ride.
Yes, it is. But I do like that he is like, it's not too late to turn back and I can't always be looking out for you, which I'm like, actually, he's always looking out for her. So the fact that he's like, I'm like,
that's true. you big liar.
But okay.
He does a great saddleless mount where he jumps up on the horse without a saddle. No, that's hard. The amount of time that I tried to learn how to mount a horse without a mounting block or a saddle skills. So that goes to show that Joe Lando / Sully really have, like, they've come a long way. They learn quick learner.
I'm going to start counting all the observant things that you notice that I never do. I'm pretty sure we're at 4 already on this episode.
And then when they're at camp, my note, and what will be my note for, like, the next, like, 6 scenes is, like, Sully is being a butt. Because he's like, don't use all the water. We can't have a fire. She says goodnight. He doesn't say goodnight back. And I'm like, dude, why you being such a butt?
Is it weird? Not that our dad is a butt, but I literally was thinking of dad being like, you can't, that shower was too long. You're wasting the water. Turn off the lights. You can't, like, I don't know why.
You mean this morning when he was like, you don't need to boil that much water for your tea. And I was like, Dad, it's 7:30. Why is this what you want to talk about?
But yeah, there is kind of this awkward moment where Dr. Mike's like buttoning up her blouse. There's this weird, uncomfortable, like prolonged eye contact. And then she says goodnight and he kind of turns over and then they look at each other again. And it's like, oh, we have to look away. That didn't just happen. So.
Prolonged eye contact is their relationship MO.
Yeah, there's a lot of chemistry being built
I think
up.
this scene, though, especially considering what Olive said earlier, this scene kind of really lets us realize how alone they are. And I think you said this at one point, but, we realize that as far as most of their interactions prior to this point have been in the town, at the homestead, where maybe they're not other people in the conversation with them, but like there's other people around.
Right.
Like even in the pilot where she gets lost and ends up in the Cheyenne camp when she's looking for Brian, and they're like alone in the teepee, but there's still like people in the village and stuff. Right. And so I think definitely this scene really does show like, oh yeah, we've never seen them this separated from anyone else.
And they've never had this interaction of like going necessarily on a trip together or a voyage or whatever you want to call it, because I think that really does bring people together and helps you get to know people on a much different level than you would in real life. So definitely. And I mean, you didn't mention this, but the next morning it's kind of like Sully has a butt moment again where he's
so grumpy and I don't understand. He gets mad at her for not waking up. And so she's not ready to pack. And I'm like, bro, if you wanted her to be up to pack, then you should have woken her up, right? Which she says that. And he's like, I said we were going to leave at sunup. But if she's not waking up, then you need to wake her. Like, there's no reason for you to be mad at her right now because you did not wake her up.
For some reason, I just kind of get it. I don't know. It's just like this thing where he's like, I think Olive's right. He's like weirdly afraid to be alone with her, so he needs some sort of defense mechanism to not like feel close or something. But yeah, he even says like, I knew this was a bad idea. So we'll see more of this to come.
It's rude.
We'll see more of this to come for sure.
But before that happens, a runaway horse comes into town and there's a body on the horse. And it's kind of gruesome because not only is there a dead body, strapped over this horse, but there's a sign tacked to his body that says, trespassers or claim jumpers will be shot. There's a lot of things that actually happen in this one little sequence, but one thing that I noticed was that it's Robert E. who reads the poster, which my thought was, we know that Robert E. was, prior to the Civil War, was a slave. But a thought that I had was that I know historically slaves were not taught to read and write, and I'm pretty sure there were rules against teaching your slaves to write. So I was a little surprised that Robert E. could read. So I looked it up, and what I found was that before the 1830s, there were no restrictions on teaching slaves to read and write. However, after the slave revolt of 1831, all slave states, with the exception of Maryland, Kentucky, and Tennessee, passed laws against allowing people to teach their slaves how to read. Because education and reading is equated to freedom. And if they can read, they can think for themselves, they can pass along, information, whatever. So what I think that kind of should tell us, either Robert E. learned to read in secret, or prior to getting his freedom, he was probably a slave in Maryland, Kentucky, or Tennessee.
Number 5, things that I did not even notice.
Anyway, after reading that message, Olive, who is awesome in this scene, she says, we've got to warn them, being Dr. Mike and Sully, which I'm not sure why she thinks that they have to warn them, because I'm pretty sure Harding made it pretty clear already that if Dr. Mike came, he was gonna shoot her anyway, Right. So, but I guess maybe the danger level or the seriousness of it, or just like that he already has shot someone, so I don't know. But then it's kind of cool. Robert E's the first one to volunteer to go, but then we learn that Grace and Robert E are watching the kids, which is sweet. And then Horace volunteers, which I'm like, go Horace. And then Hank is like, you're gonna get yourself shot. And then someone makes the comment like, oh, you're not brave enough, Hank? And he's like, it's not that I'm not brave, I'm not stupid.
Well, then I like because, Jake is giving an excuse that he has to stay and looked after the shot. And Lauren, sweet Lauren, is like, we can't let Dr. Mike get shot. In which then, this killed me. Jake says, what if someone needs a haircut? Which is just so funny because we've talked about how, like, all the things he's done beside haircuts, but then that's his excuse to not, like, go out into the wilderness.
Yeah.
Someone might need a trim.
Because he could have just said, like, well, Dr. Mike's not here, so we don't have any
And
doc.
I would have been fine with that.
But no, he had to think on the spot. What if somebody needs a haircut?
Yeah.
And then it becomes a testosterone. Well, I'll go if you go, and well, I'm not scared if you're not scared, and so we get Lauren, Jake, and Hank.
Consistent theme with them, yeah, for sure. But we're back seeing Dr. Mike is getting some water from Willow Creek. I think she can feel that, like, she feels like she's holding them up. So she tells Sully, like it's fine if you want to go on. And he's like, no. We're stopping, but we're stopping for the horses. We're not stopping for you.
No, he's so rude because she's trying so hard, not to be a burden or whatever. And he's like, we're stopping for the horses. Is that all right with you?
Is that your Sully impression?
And I'm like, dude, that's my Sully's being a butt impression.
I just keep thinking, like, this is a very comfortable setting for him and it's not for her. And there is that mismatch, and so I think it's probably frustrating for him, but you can tell she's trying so hard to prove herself, which is that's what's hard to watch.
And that's what I think is really the way he's treating her is really unfair, because she wasn't saying like, oh, I don't want to stop. She was saying like, I'm okay if you want to keep going. And so his response being like, we're stopping for the horses, is that all right with you? I'm like, chill out. Like,
I think it's a defense mechanism. I really do.
And then, not only is Sully being rude and a butt, but then he's stupid because the horses start getting nervous, and the minute your horses start getting nervous, the first thing he should be doing is grabbing those reins. Because obviously the horses are being spooked by something, and horses are flight animals. If they get scared, they run. But no, he like pulls the saddlebags off, and then he's like, oh look, it's a puma or, mountain lion. And I'm like, bro, grab your horses. But of course, for the story, he can't. And the horses go running away.
Yeah.
And then he's mad at her because he's like, we gotta keep moving. Come on. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, man. This is like, none of these things are her fault. Like, it is not her fault that you guys got off late in the morning because you didn't wake her up. And yeah, like you said, he's comfortable out there. She's not. If he wanted her to be up and ready in time, he should have woken her up so she's up and ready in time. If you want her, she was not prepared for carrying all this stuff. So why are you getting mad at her?
Sarah's going off. I need our listeners to confirm if this idea and opinion is accurate or valid or not, because I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I just feel like I can kind of understand why he was like, this is a bad idea. And then he's like, leave what you don't need behind, please. And it's kind of funny because she's like trying to decide, like, do I bring the dress? Do I bring that? Oh yes, I'm bringing the mirror. Like, she still brings a ton of stuff, which, let's be honest, she's a girl.
She brings a ton of, yeah, of course she brings a ton of stuff.
Even the most like minimalist, low maintenance girls still have things that they, so.
I would say I am also one of those people who likes to pack for every situation. Yeah. Like, what if it rains, or what if
I think you're pretty good at it now, though. You're pretty good.
Well, I'm definitely good at it because I've traveled so much, and especially like being on so many like weekend trips, school trips. Like, I know how to pack a lot really well. But this is the thing, him being mad at her for bringing a lot of stuff, especially after they lose the horses. I feel like this is equivalent to when if you're flying and you're gonna check your bag versus just bringing a carry-on. Obviously, if you're gonna check your bag, you're gonna bring those things that you couldn't bring if you were bringing a carry-on bag. Versus, like, if you have more space and you're checking it, of course I'm gonna bring that extra stuff that I maybe don't need because I have the room and I don't have to carry it. So she thought they were gonna have the horses to carry the stuff. It makes sense that she brought extra stuff. And now she's going to have to carry it.
Right.
And so But the fact that he's like, hurry up, move on, come on, we gotta go, you're taking too long.
Yeah, he does. He does this whole, like, forget it hand motion. And, of course, we immediately switch back to town where we have the Reverend, Lauren, Hank, Jake, Horace, and Matthew is now joining. And I don't know what your opinion... There's a lot of this going on in the episode where it's, like, Sully and Mike, and then we switch back to, like, the search party boys. And there's a lot of switching back. And at first, I don't think it bothered me watching it as much. But, like, kind of going through it, I realized that it happens a lot more frequently than other episodes. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote it down as a question for you later. Like, what do you think of the pacing of this episode? I actually think, for the most part, I think the pacing of the episode is good. But the switching back and forth where this episode, maybe I would say, struggles a little bit is in the tone. Because what we're going to have is where Dr. Mike and Sully are kind of, their expedition is kind of more serious of nature. We have Sully who's, kind of in a bad mood for a lot of it, and they're technically supposed to be like risking their lives, all this stuff they're experiencing. Then we have the search party, which really, I love the search party scenes, but they are mostly there for comedic effect. And so I think the struggle is then in the tone. It's kind of hard as a viewer to switch between like, oh, really comedic scene, and then back to, oh, serious life in peril scene, and then back to really funny, and then, oh, now risking our lives in another way. And and then adding the layer of romantic tension to that. So I think tonally, I don't know that the transitions and the flashing back and forth really benefits the episode. They probably still could have kept a lot of the same scenes, but maybe it would have been stronger if we as viewers spent more time with the search party having their little events, and then more time with Dr. Mike and Sully, instead of, it's very consistent, like flash here, then here, then here. And that's kind of, and I think you and I are going to feel it more, especially because we're talking about every scene.
Which, just to mention, what happens in that scene specifically is the Reverend hits his head kind of like on Robert E's sign, knocks him out. He is no longer a part of the search party. And we have our core group of men who are going out to look for Mike and Sully.
Do you think that it was hitting the sign that knocked him out? Or do you think it's because he's already feeling kind of sick from drinking the water that he gets knocked off so easily?
You make me laugh. I mean, it's not a bad idea. I just think it's funny. I mean, hopefully that was the last time he drank the water when he had those symptoms. I mean, Dr. Mike told everybody to stop. So, he might be having some, like, remitting symptoms, but for the most part I would think he just had he had a dumb moment, or they just didn't want they didn't want two logical men to be on the search party. We can only have Matthew.
Only one responsible member of the party.
Exactly. So,
well, it would kind of make sense too that the Reverend's not really, he's not really an outdoorsman either.
That we know of, yeah. But we're back. Sully and Mike.
Rattlesnake.
Sully is laying down, and sure enough, there's a rattlesnake right near him. And Dr. Mike, being the cool chick she is, uses her mirror actually to kind of blind and stun the rattlesnake, in which Sully is then able to kill it. And she makes a very like flippant, funny remark where it's like, handy little piece of junk, huh? And she basically, who knows how that scenario would have gone had she not been able to do that.
Well, Kelly, so Sully just like chucks the snake, but did you think about when we were growing up and like how like he just chops the head off and then it's like limp, but actually like snakes,
that's not realistic.
No, it's not, because so Kelly and I witnessed many snake being beheaded during our childhood in Senegal, because in our yard we had the top 7 most deadly snake species like in the area, including like the black mamba and the green viper. And so snakes are like chickens in that, there's like a chicken with its head cut off like can still move and still bite. And so I'm like, Sully, don't just chop its head off and throw it away. Like, you need to get away from it, because it seared into my 9-year-old memory is the sight of many a snake with its head cut off still writhing and trying to bite.
I had this exact thought where I'm like, how did he just pick it up? That is not how that would happen. Like, especially, I don't know how he killed it. We don't really see that exactly, but like
I would think he chopped off the head. But the point is, they can still bite you
Yes,
even
exactly.
with their head chopped.
It's still gonna have, yeah. I thought that too. That's really funny you said that, because I literally had the same thought.
But I mean, this goes to say, like, I feel kind of sad talking about, like, yeah, our childhood, we watched many a snake get killed. But the thing is, in Africa,
Poisonous.
you don't wait to see whether it's a poisonous one or not. You just kill them.
Yeah. We have a quick switch back to the men once again, looking for Dr. Mike, but they're looking for the creek. Well, they find the creek, and then they have this very, like, amateur fight over who's gonna make camp where, who's gonna sleep where, Jake's being a child, and sure enough, Mr. Skunk comes along and sprays them all down.
I told you, I enjoyed Hank so much. My favorite part is Hank's like, skunks are just bullies. And I wrote, skunks are just bullies, said the town bully.
Yeah, actually.
You know what I do like about the sequences with the search party, though, is I think that none of these guys, Lauren, Jake, Horace, Hank, none of them are outdoorsmen. Like we think of them as like, oh, they're frontiersmen, but that doesn't mean they're outdoorsmen. And it really shows like the contrast of them and Sully. Right? These guys don't have a lot of reason usually to leave the town, right? Because they're shopkeepers and store owners and, you know, barkeeps. Like, they don't have a lot of reason to travel outside Colorado Springs. And so it's really funny to see them and think about the contrast between them and them undertaking this mission at all versus, like, Sully. And it's cool that Matthew is definitely the most responsible.
Yeah, even Matthew, you know, you see all these guys in their underwear washing their clothes out, and it's like, okay, you guys are supposed to be the grown-ups here.
There's this like really candid moment when they're after they're washing their clothes or whatever in the creek, where William Shockley, I think it looks so candid and like unplanned. He like chucks, I don't know, a piece of clothing, and it hits Frank Collison, who plays Horace, like in the head, and you can see him like trying to stay in character and frown, but William Shockley like lets out this laugh that is like the most genuine laugh ever, of like just laughing at what happened. I just love that moment.
I liked it too. Dr. Mike and Sully are walking, and they come across Happy Walker's still. Sully goes to investigate, only to find that Happy Walker is dead, most likely due to mercury poisoning. And Dr. Mike takes actually a jug of moonshine kind of as her evidence to help her build her case.
Can I tell you about moonshine?
Do it. I don't really know that much, to be honest.
So, I found an article, and it was about moonshine as an American tradition. The article is linked in the resources page on our website. Without American history, there would not be moonshine, and I think that's really cool. So the reason moonshine is called moonshine to begin with is that they are illegal spirits that were made by the light of the moon in the night, secretly.
Okay, cool.
But the history of moonshine in America is after the American Revolution. I don't know if you know this, but wars are expensive. And so the new young American government the federal government had kind of bailed out all the states out of debt. And if anyone's into Hamilton, the musical Alexander Hamilton, a big part of that play musical is about Alexander Hamilton's establishment of the, American bank and credit system. And so the government needed to make up for some of the debt that it was in from the war. And so the way that they did that was they put a tax on spirits, ale, whiskey, wine, whatever, which is, in my opinion, is a little bit ironic because most people will remember that a big part of the American Revolution was, the outrage about the tea tax, but then...
Just depends what drinks you want to tax.
Well, and the reason that the tea tax was instituted was because King George wanted to get money back from the French and Indian War. And so, because wars are expensive. But anyway, part of the reason that they put a tax on spirits was because most people who made spirits did it as a part-time job. There were very few people who full-time produced whatever form of alcohol. And so the idea was that they weren't bringing the cost to anyone's like full-time job. However, people were so outraged by this tax that in 1791, during Washington's presidency, the Whiskey Rebellion happened. And this was a big deal because, some people were like, America's not going to make it as a country without Britain. And the fact that Washington, who was very much, a general, took some pretty, what some people would say extreme military measures to end this rebellion and kind of prove that America could govern itself without British interference. And so it really interesting because that was a really big turning point, but most people don't know about the Whiskey Rebellion. But moonshining was born out of that, circumventing the tax by creating it illegally and trading and smuggling and all that kind of thing. And later on, the reason moonshining would definitely be present now is after the Civil War, the American government did a very similar thing and put a tax on spirits. And so that kind of makes sense why moonshining was still very prevalent during the time that Dr. Quinn is kind of taking place post-Civil War.
Right. Okay. Wow.
And the university I went to, the first mascot that the university had was the Moonshiners.
Your Christian university was the Moonshiners?
Yeah.
But it wasn't a Christian university when they were the Moonshiners, was it?
I don't think so.
Okay, I was going to say.
Dr. Mike and Sully are walking along a rocky outlook, and he sees that she's struggling to carry all the things she's bringing, and so he makes some suggestions like, can you get rid of the jug? That's evidence. Can you get rid of the tent? She's like, what if it rains? And he kind of jerkily looks at the sky like, yeah, what if? Which is then kind of ironic later because it will rain, but no one says anything about it.
Right.
But I will say in this scene, I feel like he's less of a quote-unquote butt and more he is actually just concerned because he sees how much she's carrying and that she's struggling to carry it all. And so he is trying to literally and figuratively lighten her load in a way.
Yeah.
I think it's the next day because we see the search party then packing up, though we didn't really actually see them camp overnight. But they are again fighting which way to go. My favorite Matthew one-liner is where he makes a suggestion what direction, and they're like, what do you know? And he's like, I know enough to still have my clothes on. And I'm like, burn!
Yeah.
There's a moment where Hank, Lauren, and Jake go one way, Matthew goes the other way, and Horace kind of lingers.
And you think, oh, he's going to go with Matthew, right? He's going to trust Matthew.
But as we suspected, Horace is that kid who always gives into peer pressure.
He's a follower.
He goes with the bigger group.
Right.
We didn't mention it earlier, but they note for a second time, oh, look at this rock with a lot of holes in it.
We are back with Mike and Sully, and they are actually rock climbing, free climbing this cliff. And they hear some men coming. We're assuming that it's Harding's men, obviously.
Guards.
I don't know if it's intentional, but Dr. Mike falls. I think she's trying to get down, but she falls, and pretty hard on her arm, actually. And Sully, he jumps down to make sure she's okay, and she's pretty sure she's broken her wrist, which you wouldn't know anything about that, would you?
What? No, but I know this one girl who broke both her wrists. One time she broke it in a snowboarding accident, and one time she broke her other one in a horseback riding accident. And
you're so annoying. You sound so cool when you say that. I wish it would be less cool if you were like, oh yeah, I'm dumb and I tripped on the sidewalk and I fell and caught myself. But no, it has to be oh yeah, I was snowboarding this one time, and then another time I got bucked off a horse. I'm like, oh man.
I think it would be better to be oh, I was snowboarding and I never injured myself, and I was horseback riding and I didn't get thrown.
Okay, maybe. My point is you are making yourself sound cool right now.
Well, now I have weak wrists, but anyway. At the Mercantile, Brian's really worried about when Dr. Mike is going to be back. Olive and Robert E. reassure him that surely the search party has found them and they're on their way home already. But Grace lightens the mood by bringing in some much-needed cookies.
Right.
And then, actually, it's Brian who gives the first suggestion, you should open a cafe, which turns into Olive's willing to back her, which is awesome. And Robert E's got some space for outdoor picnic tables behind his livery.
Yeah.
And
they come up with this great idea.
Yeah, it's really cute. You know, and Grace is like, I never heard such foolishness. But then you have her, you know, saying to herself, like, Grace's
contemplating.
Cafe. And it's awesome.
It's very cute. And we have another quick switch back to Dr. Mike and Sully, and Dr. Mike now has her arm in a sling. Good job, Dr. Mike.
You know what I noticed about the sling? It's the same color as her dress, so I think she, like, made it from her skirt.
Yeah, that's awesome. Look at her being useful. Resourceful woman, yeah. But she is struggling to open the canteen of water, and Sully helps her, and there's this really, I think, good conversation where it's like Dr. Mike is insistent that you don't need to wait on me, and he's like, listen, it's okay to let people help you. And she says what we all have already known, but she's been trying this whole time to show him that she can do whatever he can do. She can prove herself, and she doesn't want to feel helpless, and now she's even in a more helpless state because she's injured. And I don't know, Sully's very simple about it, but he just says, stop trying so hard.
Yeah, at the core, like, this is Dr. Mike's struggle. And it's been built into her whole life. Her whole life, she's had to prove to everyone that she's worthy to be a doctor. She knows what she's talking about, that as a woman, she can do all these things. And I think her whole life has been built on getting people to see her and trust her. And we as audience members, like, we know that Sully sees her. You know, we know that he's never thought less of her because she's a woman, or even, like, moving out there and, like, being a city girl, right? Like, it's, oh, you're a city girl, you're a woman, you can't be a doctor, you're a city girl, you can't move out to the West, you're, you know, like, all these things. And we know that he sees her, but I don't think she knows it yet.
She doesn't. I really don't think she does.
And part of me, in this particular episode, I think it is kind of that comment that Sully made, you know, where he was like, you're just gonna slow me down. And even though we know maybe the reason he said that was for a different reason, but I think when she heard that, it triggered all those things of, like, I have to make him see me as more than just, you know, this woman who can't rough it, who can't go out. And so I don't think he meant it that way, but I can 100% understand how she heard that and was like, oh, he doesn't see me either. And I have to prove myself to him too.
And it's kind of like a little, I don't know, it kind of conflicts his earlier behavior where it's like, get it together, forget this, don't do this, you know what I mean? Like, it does make it hard in her position of like, okay, I want to prove it to you, but also like, how can I not look like I'm holding us up and being, you know what I mean? Because he was kind of harsh earlier.
Well, he even said, I can't be looking out for you, right? But now he's like, let me help you.
You know, boys, they do that.
It's kind of like that super, like, toxic, like when you're in elementary school and boys, you know, are mean to girls and people used to say,
so
it's
stupid
because he likes you. And I'm like, yeah, that's super toxic.
No. Yeah, I think he's just being tough on her because
he is a tough love kind of guy.
Yeah, he is. And so it's kind of funny because after they have this interaction, she's struggling to fix her mess of a hair, which I actually appreciated because her hair is perfect all the time. So I'm glad that, you know, the producers or whoever were like, no, let's make this realistic. She's gonna look a mess.
Yeah.
And she's trying to brush her hair, and he sees her struggling and actually brushes her hair for her, which is pretty, like...
It's the most romantic thing to ever happen in the history of TV.
Who are you? It's pretty intimate, yeah. It's definitely an intimate moment, and it is him being like, I know you didn't ask for help, but I'm still going to continue to show you that, like, it's okay to have help.
Well, and I think even the moment after, you know, she says it's an old habit, and he's like, give it up, and then he goes to lean against the tree we kind of see, you know, this whole time we've been like, what is up with Sully? But we see in this moment that he's not as unaffected by her as he's kind of putting on. He's feeling a lot of things, but he doesn't want to show.
Yeah, exactly.
At the homestead, Sully and Dr. Mike's horse come in with no riders and no saddlebags, and everyone's really worried. I don't know why Sully's horse goes back to the homestead. I feel like they probably should have just had Dr. Mike's horse show up.
They wanted to stay together.
Unless they're buddies and they just didn't want to leave each other.
That's what I want to think, yeah.
Then Wolf is swimming across is it still Willow Creek? I guess it's Willow Creek.
Probably.
It's a big creek. I will say that this scene in the episode, I feel, is the weakest and the least convincing of all the scenes. Because there's no reason why these guys shouldn't just shoot them. Like, what is the purpose of throwing dynamite? Especially when he's like, this'll for sure kill them both. The insinuation is, if we shoot at them, we might miss, or they might survive the gunshot. So why don't you have that where they shoot at them but they miss, or you know, maybe one of them gets injured or something, but instead they throw the dynamite. Sully gets knocked out. She pulls him into the reeds, and then the guys ride down there and they're like, oh, the bodies must have floated downstream, which I'm like, how does that make sense at all? You literally just saw where they were.
Yeah, it's not the most realistic.
And also, I'm like, I feel like Wolf probably would have given them away. He's not hiding. And it also just really doesn't make sense. Apparently, this other guy they just shot, and Harding said, if you come on my land, you will be shot. It's not, the stakes are not convincing here.
Yeah, they probably could have done without that scene, and the storyline would have been just fine, don't you think?
Yeah, actually, because part of it, I think, is they wanted to show Dr. Mike, quote-unquote, saving Sully, but she kind of already did that with the,
Rattlesnake?
Yeah, so... But then they're drying off, and it's kind of... I like where, you know, he's like, don't look, and she's like, keep your eyes closed.
It's just funny because it's like... Yeah, he's trying to hand her the clothes without looking, but...
Why does Joe Lando with a freaking headband suddenly look a lot more attractive?
You're shocking me this episode, because basically everything I'm thinking, you're like, let me say that. No, I know, he does look really good.
But why? There's not even context of why he does that. Like, his hair is not wet. Like,
because he can't.
He just ties it around, and I'm like, why do you look so handsome? It's probably because it's blue. I don't know. Anyway...
Right before that, he actually, you know, says thank you, you know, for someone who's near helpless. You did pretty good. And in a lot of ways, the Cheyenne would say that you have a debt on me. And I like her response that's like, we all have a debt on each other, really, you know. But it is, and there's this, like, awkward thing where it's like, oh, like, can you help me button my buttons? And then there's, like, more we hold hands for a second. Like,
intense eye contact.
Yeah, we have a lot of chemistry building, but, it is kind of a funny scene. I don't know. It made me laugh, and then it made me cringe, and then, yeah.
And then it's pouring rain, and Sully has his old habits moment where he's being stubborn. He doesn't want to come in, and she's like, don't be stubborn. Come in here. And then I'm like, he's soaking wet, man. He's going to catch pneumonia.
Influenza.
Get the flu.
Yeah, but
they hold hands again.
They do.
And, you know, they would have been dry if she still had that tent.
But he made a good shelter. That's kind of why he was out there. He's still
true.
Setting it up for her, so.
That's true.
Yeah. We're back to the men, and actually, we're not back to the men.
Well, then they reach the mill. She gets her sample.
There's some more chemical reactions going on here. She's got a little test tube, and I don't know, this just made me laugh, where she's like, be careful, that's acid. Meanwhile, he has, like, the cork top in his mouth, and he gives her a look like, seriously? Like, thanks for telling me now, but that cloth turns black, which indicates that there is mercury coming from that source. But as soon as they have this kind of grateful moment, thankful that they figured it out, they're being held at gunpoint by Harding's men.
And again, there's no reason why they don't just shoot them right there.
But they shoot at Wolf after he's like, get.
Yeah, I'm glad he sends Wolf away, but why did they shoot at Wolf anyway? I don't know. But This is where it's like inconsistent. Like, we've made Harding out to be this cold-blooded killer, and I think something that could have fixed this inconsistency, where we're like, Harding has said, we will shoot you if you come on our land. There's no reason why these guys don't shoot him. What I think would have been stronger if earlier the guys had shot at them in the crossing the creek and, you know, missed or whatever. They know they're there, so then Harding's like, go and find them. But then Calvin maybe drinks the water and gets sick, and then now they have a reason for keeping Dr. Quinn and Sully alive. Because
right.
the thing is, it's not that I want our main characters to get shot, but if you say this person is gonna kill them, we need to actually believe that our main characters are at risk. And unfortunately, with what kind of happens in this episode, we've made it out to seem like, oh, they could get shot. That's why we sent a search party out. But nothing that's happened has actually showed that they could be shot. And that kind of lowers the stakes. You don't want your main character to survive just because their name is in the title. It's not a free pass to be like, it's called Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, so she can't die. No, she can die, but circumstance A, B, and C help her survive or whatever.
Right. And we'll see them at the mill with Harding, but before that, there's a real quick snippet of the men in their underwear realizing that they're going in circles. They're arguing. They're trying to find someone to blame it on. You know, they're like, it's all because of the Reverend. And then they're like, no, it's really because of Dr. Mike poking her nose where it doesn't belong once again. And then, like I said, we're at the mill with Harding. They are quickly informed again that they've broken the law by coming on his land. And
he has the right to shoot them. Well, and then also, I think one thing that's a little weird about this scene is, because she says, we have the evidence, you're poisoning the water. But then Sully says, your mines aren't safe. Which, my question is this about the water, or is this about the mines? Like, and I know they're interchangeable, right? They use the mercury to get the gold out of the rock that's pulled from the mines. But from my understanding, you know, the point of all this endeavor was to prove that Harding was poisoning the mines, not necessarily to prove that his mines were dangerous, because that's not what they're investigating.
That's true.
Wolf then finds the search party, and so they start following him. So good on Wolf, resourceful. And again, here in Harding's camp, they take Dr. Mike and Sully, they've taken them into a tent, and Dr. Mike says to Sully, like, what do you think they're going to do with us? And Sully says, well, probably take us into the woods somewhere and make it look like an accident, which in the very last scene, Harding said, I have a right to shoot you for trespassing. So why do they need to make it look like an accident? You know, all that it would have taken to fix this is just switch the order of the things that happened a little bit, where the reason he's keeping her alive is because his son is already sick, which in this scene
he is. We didn't mention this, but there is a brief clip of him taking that moonshine that Dr. Mike brought, and he drinks it. It's obviously full of mercury, so he's very sick. He's having some of the symptoms we've already seen before. And so they bring Dr. Mike and they're like, come on, fix him, do something. And so she says, go get some charcoal. And if he ingests some of this charcoal, it'll actually absorb the toxins, absorb the mercury. Kind of what I said earlier, it will bind to the mercury so that it doesn't bind to other receptors in the system. Which I don't know. I'm kind of like, okay, I don't know why there's charcoal around, but
for the fires.
That's cool. Like, no. It's not like charcoal briquettes that you like bring to your cookout. It's like natural. Charcoal is just a form of carbon, right? So I'm pretty sure you can find that naturally in the environment, but I'm not sure exactly how it would work. Today we use like actual activated charcoal.
I had to take charcoal once when I accidentally drank the water in China, because you're not supposed to drink the water, but it's not like in like third world countries, because it has like all sorts of bacteria or like animal feces. It's just the water in China is like really rusty because the pipes are like super old. And it was like when I first moved there, I accidentally just like filled up a glass of water and took a big drink and then panicked and then Googled what's gonna happen to me, and it was like diarrhea and puking and all the horrible things. And then we realized I actually have a really strong stomach because I didn't get sick at all. But I did later that day, I took charcoal tablets to like help flush whatever got in me.
Absorb and it works for Calvin, Harding's son here. And in fact, she even says that they sent someone to town to get paregoric. We mentioned that earlier. And she actually says, like, don't let him drink the water and get him lots of milk, which I was a little confused by. Part of me is like, oh, sometimes when you give something like charcoal or even some of those chelating agents I was talking about earlier, they bind to that toxin or metal, but sometimes they actually bind to things that are good, like vitamins and things that you need. So I was like, maybe he's losing a lot of calcium, so they're trying to replace that. But actually, I know that today, if you give people charcoal, you're really supposed to avoid dairy products because it can actually decrease the effects of that charcoal. So I'm not sure exactly why she stated that.
But maybe it's because they used real fire-burning charcoal, so she didn't want it to, like, the bad stuff, so the milk was, like, balancing it.
I'm not sure that's how it works, but okay, if you say so. Oh, man.
Harding does decide that he'll make some changes in order to protect the people of the town.
Right. I mean, he doesn't want to shut down the operation because that would cost him a lot of money, but Sully says, okay, what about a tailings pond? You could dam up all the waste with it so it wouldn't seep into the water.
Which, from an environmentalist perspective, tailings ponds are still super toxic and super, like, unhealthy for the environment. And if animals get into it, which they didn't really talk about this in the whole episode, but I feel like the first sign of sickness, it would have been interesting if they had showed, like, horses or cattle getting sick. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, all sorts of, like, waterfowl or fish or whatever, you know, because I know fish, when I think of, like, mercury poison, I know oftentimes, you said it earlier, but, like, fish are usually, especially, like, fisheries who produce a lot of fish, like, some of those fish will get high concentrations of mercury in them, and then people eat it and animals eat it.
Yeah. But Harding does agree to it. And in fact, he even offers to compensate Dr. Mike for helping his son, in which she says, no, forget it. What you can do for me is you can make a settlement with the family of Happy Walk.
Which earlier we said Walker, so I think that's a mistake.
Yeah.
But it's okay, she never met him, so she doesn't remember.
That's true. And Harding even gives him horses to go back to town.
And Matthew shows up in the camp, and how did Matthew not get shot?
Good question. He's just that stealthy, or all the guys are at camp. I don't know. But our search party is still following Wolf, and of course Wolf brings them right to Dr. Mike, Sully, and Matthew. And there's this very cute and gracious interaction because Lauren's like, we've been searching forever, Dr. Mike. You know, and she's like, oh, thank goodness you found us, even though really...
She's really nice about it because, you know, Matthew has told both Sully and Dr. Mike, like, they were useless. They got sprayed by a skunk. They were going in circles. They fought the whole time, so I ditched them.
And there's even, like, another instance where they're like, let's go this way. And Sully's like, maybe I should lead, like... And everybody's like, yeah.
What I really love about this scene, though, like, you mentioned it, Lauren's like, we've been looking for you for days. And then Jake is like, you're hurt? And she's like, oh, just broke my wrist.
Jake showing concern for another human being. I love it.
He sounds so genuine, like worried that she's hurt. Even Hank, who can't be bothered to show that he cares about anybody, is like, folks in town was worried you'd get shot.
Like, I care, but I don't want you to think that I care. Yeah, they make their way back to town where Grace is actually setting up her cafe.
And Wolf comes in, and the party comes in, and they're all super excited, and the search party gets 3 hip hip hoorays, and Dr. Mike announces the good news that they've been successful. Harding is gonna stop no more mercury in their drinking water.
Because we almost forget that was the point of this expedition. I'm like, thank you for bringing it back, because that is important. That is why you went out. Yeah. And also I'm just laughing because I'm like, these guys are, like, literally in their underwear in front of everyone, and it's like, oh, yeah, it's casual, like, we found them, like, it was, you know, it's all us, even though we know it's not really.
Well, someone asked, like, what happened to your clothes, and why do you smell like that? And they're like, I think it's Olive's like, maybe you should go wash up first. And Hank smacks his hat in her face and like, after we eat.
After we get some cornbread in our stomachs. Yeah. And also, Lauren, I really like the interaction that Lauren has where he says to Matthew, we know who the real hero is. Like, next time I'm definitely following you.
I love
Which
that.
is a nice acknowledgement. Yeah, yeah.
And then we end the episode with Sully and Dr. Mike kind of, acknowledging they both have each other to thank. And the biggest flirt that Dr. Mike has ever thrown his way, she's like, we'll call it even. And I'm like,
you think that's more flirty than all the other stuff that's happened in the episode? Like putting his arm around her when they're sleeping?
Yes.
Too funny. I like that it ends it with that, though, and there's not like this like big conversation of everything that's happened. It's just like, yeah, we recognize that we've gotten closer, we've been vulnerable with each other, and now things have ended positively, and they've learned a little bit about each other too. So I like that it ends with that, and it doesn't have to be like this big romantic moment. Like it's not. It's really not. So,
what is your favorite scene?
I don't know how every time I'm like not prepared to say what my favorite scene is. I think mostly because we discuss it and then I change my mind about things. But I hate to be cliche, but probably the scene where they being Mike and Sully have this conversation about like it's okay to let people help you. You don't have to do everything by yourself. You don't have to prove yourself. And after they have that conversation, he brushes her hair, which again I think is very intimate and very vulnerable. And I really do believe that like anybody that's like friends or in a relationship or anything, like you should do a trip together. You should, I don't know, like we were talking earlier and you were saying that like, what were you saying? Like people that go through like traumatic experiences together, it really brings them closer.
Yeah, I read an article that was like, yeah, people who go traumatic or fearful experiences together are 10 times more likely to fall in love.
Well, it's my point that it brings people closer, and I think it's important in getting to know, like really get to know that person. So I enjoyed that part of the episode. Yours?
I like when the search party and Dr. Mike, Sully, and Matthew like all meet up, and I just love Jake, Hank, and Lauren. Like they're so excited and they're so genuinely concerned, and it's adorable. And yeah. I think it just shows so much progress for our characters, and not that it'll always, that they'll love Dr. Mike in all moments later, but they do genuinely like. She's a part of the town, and she's a part of their lives now, and they don't want to see her injured or hurt or lost. I like that scene a lot.
I do too.
Ranking.
What are you feeling?
I'm feeling...
Oh, she's holding up a number 1. Really?
Yes.
That's like a bold statement.
Okay, but think about it. Our top 3 right now are... the pilot, which is kind of unfair because that one is so crammed full of everything. The Visitor, which I loved. Yeah. And what's the third one?
Law of the Land.
Law of the Land. This is definitely better than Law of the Land. I would say I really like The Visitor. So the thing is, like, there are a lot of episodes with big emotional moments for the characters. Like, I think big emotional moments in The Visitor, especially with, like, Michaela and her mom and all this kind of thing, and the establishment of her getting the clinic, like, that's really important. But I think definitely in this episode, especially with, like, Sully and Dr. Mike, like, seeing them recognizing the struggles in each other, like, there are these small, intimate moments, but they're really, really deep about, what it's going to take for them to overcome some of their flaws and face some of their struggles and their fears and do it together, and to see the town really come together to, like, support Dr. Mike. I just feel like all in all, this episode as a whole is just really awesome. I can't think of a better word.
Yeah. I obviously love the pilot, so it's hard for me to put anything above it, but
if this one is not better than the pilot, then which one is going to be, right?
Yeah. No, I agree. It's a good episode. I think it includes all the characters, which is really nice because a lot of times we don't see characters for certain episodes. And also, let's be honest, everybody's been waiting for some sort of progression in Mike and Sully's relationship, and we finally get something, which is really... I don't know. It's satisfying to see that. And I think there's a good message. There's still comedic. There's still some like character development and growing. And so I enjoyed it as well. So if you want to put it as number 1, I think I'm okay with that.
Okay. So then our new top 3, Badwater, The Pilot, and
The Visitor. Let us know if you guys agree. I would really love to know what you guys think. I think this is a well-loved episode, but I'm not sure if everybody agrees with that.
And if you don't agree, there's a brand new page on our website that has our ranking, and you can comment below with your rank, and you can include later episodes. We'll continue to be spoiler-free and only add episodes as we watch them, but I would love to see some other people's ranking of your episode. So please go onto our website and comment on that. Don't forget to submit your lessons for this episode. Lots of big ones. Probably could do a lot of funny ones too. Like, for example, a lesson that Horace, Lauren, and Jake learned is that Hank knows nothing about wildlife.
Unless you want to get sprayed by a skunk, then he's your man to go to.
All natural perfume. Hank's new scent. Available in Bray's Mercantile. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you like this episode, you can support us by commenting, liking, or sharing our content on social media, which includes
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Don't forget about our website. And we have an email, just to remind you, notaladypodcast@gmail.com. We would really love to hear from you guys. And we'll be sharing lessons at the beginning of every episode. So write in if you want to get featured.
Our next episode, Season 1, Episode 8, which is The Great American Medicine Show.
Looking forward to that.
And we want to wish you guys a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving!
We won't be uploading a new episode before then, so hope you guys have a really nice time with your family and eat lots of turkey and think about what if Sully had brought you that turkey.
Exactly. Hopefully there'll be no arguments over who's carving it, though. All right, guys, we will see you next time.
Bye.